Welcome in this video of the House of Asian Cinema. Thank you for tuning in to watch this video, which will be a return on the Im Kwon-Taek video I've published a couple of weeks ago. So as it is the first time I'm doing that, I'm going to explain a bit the way I would like the channel to be. So each month I'm going to publish one video on a specific topic. It may be about one specific director, like that was for Im Kwon-Taek, but it may be some other films, which may be a specific genre, some specific questions, some specific aspects of Asian cinema. So after this video would have been published, ideally it's going to get some reactions, some comments, some criticisms, some questions, and I would like then to gather all these comments and get back to them in another video like this one 2 to 3 weeks later, in order to try to dig a bit deeper on the subject. Here we are together to discuss a bit further on Im Kwon-Taek. So I got a couple of reactions about the video, and the main question I've been asked about it is why choose to do a video about Im Kwon-Taek. And the main reason behind that is that I've noticed that a lot of Korean cinema fans tend to watch only Korean films post 2000s. They almost never watch films which have been made the previous decades. I think it's really a waste. Of course, I understand why. I mean, the Korean cinema has become quite famous post 2000, and since then it has really become more and more dynamic. It has managed to gather a huge fan base, and for good reasons. And if you take the average Korean production post 2000s and you compare it to the average production of the previous decades, clearly the average production post 2000 is superior to the ones which have been made before. Having said that, there are still many good Korean films which have been made in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s a bit less, in the 60s. And among them there are Im Kwon-Taek films. I think it's really good when you are interested in a specific cinema to try to watch as much of it, but on a large period, not just based on a specific timeline, on a specific genre, but try to watch different things which have been made all over the time, all over the ages, and then you have a better idea of the culture, of the way the cinema has evolved, of the main themes which are constant all over the time. And so you always have a better understanding of the cinema if you try to enlarge your horizon and really try to cover as many periods as you can. So that was my objective when I did this video. I wanted to push Korean cinema fans to get a bit out of their comfort zone and try to discover films which have been made before their favorite period of Korean cinema. I don't know if I've managed, but if some of you have done so thanks to the video, then I will consider my mission has been done. Another reason why I did this video is because I sincerely think that Im Kwon-Taek is the best Korean director. There have been a lot of noise about Korean cinema recently because of Bong Joon-ho's Parasite victory at the Oscar and several other awards they got. Of course, it's a good thing. I mean, Parasite is a good film, so it's good that it got some recognition, and it's good that it attracts some attention on Korean cinema in general. So all this is a good thing, but I'm a bit surprised by the enthusiasm there have been on Parasite, and at the same time films which I consider superior, like Seoppeonji, like The Surrogate Mother, so Im Kwon-Taek films that I have talked about in my video, seems to be completely forgotten, and I find it really, really weird and unfair in a way that current Korean cinema filmmakers are being recognized. That part is fair, that part is normal. I mean, they should have been, so that's great. But at the same time, I think that good, even better filmmakers should also be recognized a bit more than what they have been. And I think Im Kwon-Taek is in this category. There is some kind of an agreement that he is a good director, that he deserves recognition, but there is a lack of passion when it comes to him. It seems nobody really talk about him. There are not much article about him. He's kind of forgotten, I'm afraid. And I really think it's a waste because, as I said, I really think he is the best Korean director to this day. To this day, I think the best Im Kwon-Taek films are better than the best Bong Joon-ho films, the best Park Chan-wook film, the best Kim Ki-duk film, even if those films are good too. But if you really take them on a comparative scale, I think Im Kwon-Taek films are better. And for this reason, I think he deserves much more recognition than he got. And that was one of the reasons why I did this video. At the same time, that was a way for me to express the DNA of this channel. So this channel is not going to talk about Marvel and Star Wars, all these big blockbusters, which seems to be the bread and butter for most of the cinema YouTubers. And I understand why. I mean, it gathers a lot of views when you talk about that, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is clearly talk about Asian cinema in its diversity and try to push you in a way to discover this cinema. If you are already interested about Asian cinema in general, I don't think my video will get you a lot of new information about the subject because you are probably already quite aware of it, you are probably knowledgeable enough. So I probably won't be able to enrich you much more. But I think it may have an impact on people who are casually interested about Asian cinema but who don't really know in which direction to go. I hope that with the video I'm making I will be able to get your interest, to get your curiosity active, and for you to try to look for these films, to watch these films, and hopefully to like these films, and then become more and more interested in the cinema of Asia, because obviously there is a lot of good things to find there. I also got a comment from John T. Chance, who said he was not that convinced by the new Korean cinema. By new Korean cinema is talking about Korean cinema since 2000. And he's not convinced about the new Korean cinema because he is much more thrilled by the Hong Kong New Wave, the golden age of Hong Kong cinema during the 80s and 90s, or the Japanese golden age, which was during the 50s and 60s. And he finds it much less interesting compared to this filmography. I can understand its point of view. I tend to agree. I mean, if I had to rank this different golden age, I would probably put the Korean golden age as the last of the three. Having said that, you cannot deny that currently Korean cinema is the most dynamic of the three. Compared to Japan, compared to Hong Kong, Korean cinema is clearly the one which is the most creative, which is the most interesting nowadays. And so you have to accept it, and you have to be actually happy about it, because that's a good thing. It's a good thing that they are enjoying such a long golden age. It's been already 20 years that they are at the top, which is quite long for this kind of golden age. Usually they rarely are longer than that. Good for them. And they seem to keep going strong, as once again Parasite has proven. So that's a good thing. We should enjoy it. We should continue to watch what they are doing. We should also be happy about it, because when one country in Asia enjoys such a creative time, that tends to push the other cinema of the region to try to emulate it. So right now, none of the other cinema in the region really managed to reach that point, but there are some attempts, there are some good try, and we can hope that it will continue to create some kind of healthy emulation for cinema in general in the region. I also got a comment from Paul Quinn, who is a regular from Podcast on Fire. I don't know if you are aware of Podcast on Fire, so it's a podcast which deals with Hong Kong and Korean cinema. So check it out if you are interested about this subject. Paul Quinn, who had the opportunity to interview Im Kwon-Taek a few years back. I will put the link to his interview in the description below. And he said that Im Kwon-Taek was somebody very modest, very shy, who was a bit ashamed of a part of his filmography, but basically someone very kind or very nice, and that's always a good thing to hear, that a talented filmmaker is also a good human being. If you are interested in Im Kwon-Taek and you want to dig a bit deeper on his work, I can warmly recommend the book here by the Korean Film Council, which has some very interesting features, the main one being a long interview with Im Kwon-Taek, in which he talks about most of the film he has done. He talks about his childhood, which is very interesting because he has experienced different time of Korea, which were not necessarily the happiest one. I mean, like the Japanese colonization, the dictatorship, and so that's very interesting to know his experience, to understand better how Korea was and how it has influenced his work. Aside from this big interview, there are some less exciting features. There is a long filmography with all the credit for his films, which in my opinion is a bit of a waste, because you can find this kind of informations on internet very easily, so not sure that it's really a big interest to have it in a book, but anyway, it's there. And you also have a long analysis about Im Kwon-Taek's career and some of the films he develops. I'm a bit not that convinced by that part personally, because some conclusions made by the author, by the writer, I don't really share them. For example, he says that Im Kwon-Taek is a very strict Confucian in a way. I mean, he really follows the Confucian values, which I'm not that convinced when I see his film. I think he's much more critical of that than what the writer want to say there. But anyway, it's interesting to read because that's a viewpoint from a Korean about Korean films, and obviously it has a different cultural baggage, which makes him have a different view of his work. And for Westerners like me, that's always interesting to read. And so if you are from another culture than the Korean one, I think this analysis will always be interesting to read as well, even if you don't agree necessarily with all the points that the writer makes. So greatly recommended. Here it is for this return to Im Kwon-Taek. The next video will be published next week, and so I will do a similar video where I will discuss about your comments, about your questions, a couple of weeks after. I hope you will enjoy it, and I will see you back very soon. Thank you.